Okay, well, welcome back, church. This is our third time to be gathered together on Wednesday night, online and on the internet. I know it's a strange time, but we're so glad that you've decided to tune in. We want to encourage you to comment below, join in the conversation. If I say something dumb, you can call me out for it below, or if I say something you like, we encourage you to share it with other people. And again, we're doing this in the hopes of spreading the good news, spreading the gospel, even in this season of life. We've learned through this process that social media and the internet can be a powerful tool for spreading God's kingdom, and we encourage you to be a part of that process. When this first happened and we started, maybe realizing, okay, we're going to be in our homes for a long time, I kind of thought, sweet. My wife and I, Natalie, just bought a house when we moved here. I was like, man, this is great. We can get all of our projects done and get all these things accomplished that we've been wanting to do. And we've been doing so. We've been getting some things done, moved the laundry room, painted some walls. And I wonder, church, if this is a time where you might have more time on your hands, where life might be a bit slower, you're stuck at home. And I wonder if this is a time to look inward, to maybe do some soul work, to look inside and ask, I wonder if I have any maybe unhealthy habits that I've fallen into, if there's some spiritual practices that I'd like to grow in and begin in this time. Because again, a part of this series is digging deep into our faith, using this time to grow closer with God and not just a time where we coast by or we check out. So I encourage you to do that during the season. Now, I'm sure a lot of us during this time might be going kind of crazy, right? Especially those with big families and maybe little ones in the house. All under the same roof for long periods of times. I'm sure our hours and our days might be bleeding together, right? So this evening, we have a great study for you. Lawana Maxwell, Highlands Women's Minister, is going to join us for a conversation about meals. And what we're going to study just for a few moments from God's Word is how can we make our meals holy? How can we make our meals a meaningful time, not only in the strange season of life, but moving forward? How can they be beneficial for our faith and beneficial for our spiritual growth? And we're looking forward to this conversation. Now, those with big families or young children, you might be thinking, is this even possible? Like meals and dinners are a time where we just survive. We've got kids throwing food on the walls and spilling drinks and doing all sorts of things. And we want to encourage you and remind you that this is not about being perfect. We don't expect you to start doing all these practices tomorrow morning or tomorrow night for dinner. It's not about being perfect. It's about our pursuit of Jesus. And that's what we're hoping we can study this evening is how is the way that we look at our meals and this time around a dinner table, how can this help us in our pursuit of Jesus and help deepen our faith? So we're really excited about this conversation. Now, if you look at the Gospels, we see that Jesus used meals in a really special way. It's clear that Jesus thought meals were really important. And in fact, Jesus is constantly being invited in other people's homes for food. I realized when I was studying this that Jesus and college students kind of have something in common, and that is that they're really good at getting invited over for free food. And that's my bad joke for the evening. I apologize. There won't be any more of that for the rest of the evening. But think about the story of Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus hears that Jesus is coming down this road, so he gets up into a tree, wee little Zacchaeus that he was, and he looks for Jesus. And Jesus sees him and he says, Zacchaeus, come down from that tree because I must stay at your home today. And that was Jesus inviting himself over for a place to stay and food. So we're going to look at this evening is how Jesus uses meals for his ministry, especially in the Gospel of Luke. With each of these lessons that we are producing and putting out for Wednesday evening, if you go to Highlands website and you go to the About tab and then go to classes and groups and then the sub-tab Wednesday nights, you will see all of our videos backlogged, but also you'll find a PDF. And with each of these PDFs that you can download or print, there's going to be additional resources. This includes videos or books that we suggest. It's going to have some scriptures and discussion questions. And it's also going to have some prompts for prayers to encourage you in this time. So you can find those. And in that PDF for this lesson, there's going to be a few more stories from the Gospel of Luke of Jesus using tables to minister to people. But tonight we're going to look at just two of those. In Luke chapter 7, we find this incredible story of this woman who comes into a dinner party that she is not invited into. And we see that when she comes in, she falls at the feet of Jesus. She begins weeping and worshiping and begins to wash Jesus' feet with her hair. And the host of this party, a Pharisee, leans over and says, if Jesus was really a prophet, wouldn't he know who this woman is, that she was sinful? And he wouldn't want that to be happening. So let's read what Jesus says in response to this. Luke chapter 7, starting in verse 45. Do you see this woman? I entered your house, and you gave me no water for my feet. But she has wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You gave me no kiss. But from the time I came in, she has not ceased to kiss my feet. You did not anoint my head with oil, but she has anointed my feet with ointment. Therefore I tell you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. But he who is forgiven little loves little. For Jesus, meals represent this place where we practice equality and forgiveness with one another. Jesus around this table at the house of a Pharisee is making a bold statement. Because where the host sees this woman for her sins and for her past, Jesus sees her for her humanity. And because of her humanity, there's a spot for her at this table. There's something special, I think, about passing around plates of sides and green beans or mac and cheese and passing around each other and rubbing elbows with one another. I think there's power in sharing food with other people. It breaks down these barriers, and I think it challenges us to be more kind and more caring people as a whole. It's harder not to see someone's humanity when we're sitting down with them and sharing a meal. At church, this makes me wonder and want to ask this question. If our children and our neighbors saw who we were eating with, what would they see? Would they see people who look just like us, who have the exact same experience? I think that's an important question to ask. What Jesus also does in Luke chapter 7 is he shows us, and we kind of talked about this last week or a few weeks ago, is that Jesus uses meals to teach. He uses this unexpected guest and this mealtime to share truth. He gives powerful insight into what forgiveness truly looks like. How forgiveness by God's grace is wrapped up in love and humility. Church, our meals can be used as this time for sharing wisdom and passing on insight or spreading the kingdom of God. But are we using meals for that purpose? Because meals are a perfect time to do this. Grant Skeldon wrote a book called The Passion Generation, where he writes this. Discipleship isn't adding something to your calendar, it's including someone in your calendar. Church, I think sometimes we get overwhelmed with the busyness of life. We want to raise our kids well, and we want to share the gospel to our neighbors and our coworkers, and we want to help bring disciples in the church. But where's the time? And we don't feel like we could add another thing to our calendar. But Skeldon would argue it's not about what you add to your calendar, but it's about who you add to your calendar. And meals are a perfect time to do this. We've got to eat anyways, right? We can use meals as a time to teach and encourage and enrich the people around us. Let's look at one more example of Jesus' table ministry before we get to our conversation with Loana. Luke chapter 5, starting in verse 27. After this, he went out and saw a tax collector named Levi sitting at the tax booth. And he said to him, "Follow me." And leaving everything, he rose and followed him. And Levi made him a great feast in his house. There was a large company of tax collectors and others reclining at table with them. And the Pharisees and their scribes grumbled at his disciples, saying, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" And Jesus answered them, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." A few chapters after this, Jesus will be called a friend of sinners. Can you think of a better compliment than that? Being called a friend of sinners? We see Jesus uses meals to be this meeting point with other people. It's a place where we can begin to deepen our relationships with one another. And it's during meals that we begin to realize who people are, to hear their past experiences, hear how they grew up. We celebrate holidays and major life events around a table. And each family is unique, right? Each person is individual and has a different experience. And I think meals highlight that, don't they? Does your family like to have loud conversations that really sound like arguing around the dinner table? Or does your family spend hours and hours at the table taking a long time to eat? Or maybe your family plays games after a meal. This shows us that, meals give insight to who people are. I think that's why it's important to do what Jesus did, that we're not only hosting people for meals, but that we're going to other people's homes and learning more about them through this holy and special place around a dinner table. Jesus was known as a friend of sinners, and that we see that those relationships flourished and started around food. And the question I think we need to ask is, are we allowing meals to be a place where our friendships are deepened, where our families grow closer together? This takes intentionality. I think this might take, putting the phones to the side and turning off screens and technology. Besides, you need both hands to eat, right? Anyways, you can't text and Snapchat and do whatever these young kids are doing nowadays. I want to share a story as we end this evening on the power of meals. So like I mentioned earlier, my wife, Natalie, and I just moved back to Memphis, and something we were really looking forward to was joining a group of people our own age with different experiences and different backgrounds and getting plugged in. And at Highland, we have a group called the 222 group, which is our young professional group. And they do something kind of unique and different, is that every Wednesday night from 6:30 to 8:30, we share a meal and we study and we worship. And I have to give a big shout out to Lori and Robbie Betts for constantly making that meal for us and taking that stress off of us. But there's power in that meal, because after just a few weeks of being a part of this group, we felt as if we had been there for years. And I've got to connect that with sitting down and eating with other people. Studying the Word and worshiping together is so important for our faith. But there's something powerful about sitting down and eating with other people. It increases, and I think speeds up this process of getting to know one another. So we're about to get to our conversation on making meals holy and what that looks like, and I can't wait for that. We hope you stick around for that conversation. But let's recap very quickly. Meals can be a powerful way for our faith to be deepened, and it's a place where we can bless people. And when we follow the example of Jesus and his ministry around a table, we find that tables can be a place of equality and forgiveness, where all people are welcome. And it's a place where our faith can be enriched and encouraged, and a place where our relationships are strengthened. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I'll see you at the end of our conversation, but let's go talk with Luana. Well, hey again. I've moved places. I ran over really fast from the youth center for our conversation that we have this evening with Luana Maxwell. Now, I do want to say that we have a table that we measured at 6 feet long, so we're keeping our social distancing. But we're really excited about our conversation tonight. So, Luana, could you introduce yourself and a bit about what you do at Highland?
Yeah, sure. So, I'm Luana Maxwell. I'm the women's ministry leader here at Highland. I've been here for about 13 years, and it's really a blessing for me to be able to speak into the lives of the women here. And I'm really thankful for being invited to be a part of this discussion. I think it's incredibly important to talk about table life and what that means to our families.
Yeah, wonderful. So I'm going to start off with an easy question for you. So can you share with us a favorite meal or maybe a favorite memory that's related to a meal that you've had?
Yeah. So one that comes to mind is when I was little and I was growing up. So we were missionaries in France. And so in France, as in most of Europe, you have long lunches. So we had 2 hours for lunch. And so I was able to go home from school every day and have lunch with the whole family. And that was incredibly important to me at the time because I didn't have to wait to the end of the day to re-energize and to be, to be encouraged because, go to school, come home, and reconnect with everybody. And then I could go back out again for the rest of the day. So that was hugely important. Another funny memory I have is of my own children when they were growing up. So this is funny. And I think it's really important to have fun at mealtime. So my daughter, she was little. She was trying to get rid of some food she didn't want. And so she was going to give it to the dog under the table. Well, that was a great plan, except the dog caught her foot.
Oh, no.
And wouldn't let go. And so that was a little traumatic at the time, but now
I can
thinking
imagine.
back on it, that's just a funny memory.
That's wonderful. Well, it seems like from your first story, going home with your parents, it seems like that kind of made a routine in your life. So can you talk about, just for a moment, what you think the impact and the influence that our meals can have with our family members and loved ones?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I think mealtime together is huge when we can all come together as a family and take the time to slow down enough to reconnect with each other. And so much can happen. So many positive things can come from that. And I think in our day and age, culturally, we are just not there anymore. We are all about fast,
Go.
going, running. We don't eat together very much. We're eating on the go. We're eating on the run. We're eating alone. We're eating in shifts. We're eating in front of our computer, in front of the TV. We're eating in the car. And so it's very rare to be able to have time to come together as a family, but hugely impactful because it can be a time to encourage one another, a time to remind each other of how important we are to each other and to recenter as a family. So I think it can be a huge influence if we will use that time in that way.
Exactly, yeah. So how would you say that meals and celebrating are kind of connected? I think that's a big thing meals do is we celebrate not only our family, but it's a moment to celebrate God and a lot of other things. So what would you make of that question?
Oh, yes, definitely. A lot of celebration can take place around the table. I mean, first of all, you're celebrating who you are as a family. So you're celebrating each other. You're celebrating that you are important to each other. It doesn't have to be a special day. It doesn't have to be a birthday. It doesn't have to be a holiday. It's just every day. You are important to us. We are important to each other, and let's celebrate that. So there is that. There is also celebrating spiritually. And I think that's something that even if we do understand celebrating each other emotionally and encouraging each other emotionally, we don't necessarily understand spiritually. We don't think about it. But I think that can be a huge part of our mealtime together. So, for example, let me share some things with you, some reasons why I say that. So I'm going to go out on a limb a little bit, but just bear with me.
Yep.
So in the Old Testament, the altar was, spiritually speaking, a gathering place.
Yeah, big
so
deal.
Families would gather around the altar, or if not the whole family, at least the father representing the family would gather in front of the altar to appeal to God, to come to God, to be reconnected with God and have that relationship restored as he offered sacrifices and he received God's blessing in that place. So in the New Testament, as Christians, we have moved to celebrating the Lord's Supper every day, every first day of the week. That is something that we do that has very much a celebration aspect to it.
That's right.
It's a ritual that has meaning. And we come together as a church family to celebrate our hope, to be reminded of our hope in Christ. We come around the Lord's table and we eat together. And so that's a hugely important thing for us as Christians.
That's right.
I think what we miss, though, and we don't think about the fact that we can take that into our homes every single day. We have the opportunity to gather as a family around our table, our kitchen table, which can look all kinds of different ways, different sizes, different shapes, different material that it's made out of. It doesn't matter what the table looks like. It's the fact that we can come together around that table and be gathered together and be reminded as a family, this is our hope. As a family, this is who we are, and this is whose we are, and we can celebrate that. And I think that is a whole different mindset than what most of us have nowadays. I think it could be hugely important when we think about discipleship as far as our family goes and discipling our children.
I think that's exactly right. And I think that's something that's easy to forget. Like you said, we get so busy and we're going. And it does take some intentionality. And, I would encourage parents and spouses that, if we just kind of breathe at the beginning of a meal, just let things settle, let things rest, and even consider maybe where we saw God's hope in our day, and that's the table becomes a place of sharing, I think would be really beneficial.
Definitely. It's definitely a place where you share.
Yeah.
I mean, not only do you encourage each other and you build each other up, but you share what's happened to your day, what's happened to you, how you've seen God at work, how you have let God use you. And so it's definitely a huge opportunity to share and to learn and to teach. It's a great teaching time as well. But I do want to say this, though, because I know moms are thinking right now, they're thinking, because I would be thinking this too, oh my goodness, is she for real? Like, do I have to put that much thought in every meal that I plan? I cannot do that. My life is crazy. I am running. I'm trying to take care of my family, and I cannot fit one more thing into my day. Either that or my kids, they're 3 years old. They're 4 years old. There is no way that they're going to be still and quiet. Cannot be a perfect situation. Or, oh, I have teenagers. They are so moody. They are so grumpy. This would never work at my house. So I just want to say, it's not about being perfect. We're not saying you have to prepare the perfect meal and you have to plan the perfect meal. It's about being purposeful.
That's great. I think that's right on it. We talked about this a little bit. Could you talk about maybe the benefit of this being a consistent thing that not only our kids can look to, but our parents kind of look forward to? And what do you think it does when we make meals a routine? It's like a purposeful time of gathering together.
Yeah, I do. I do think it's super important. I do think it's very difficult too. And I'm not even saying every day. That would be pretty much impossible for most of us. But I know when my kids were growing up, and even when they were still in college, we were still doing this when they were in college. They would come home for the summers or whatever. We had one night a week that we set aside as family dinner time. And that worked for us. I mean, different families can, do it different ways. If you can do it more than once a week, that is awesome. But if you can't, at least have one time a week that's a regular time for your family to come together. And for a meal, you're breaking bread together. You are gathering around the table, whatever that looks like. And you just work it out with your schedule. You just tell your kids, this is important enough that we're going to find a night of the week or a lunch. It doesn't really matter what time it is. Whatever works for my family, whatever works for your family, we're going to be intentional about it, and we're going to work our schedules around it. And I think this is a huge thing, a huge shift in our mindset, because right now, most of us plan our meals around activities.
Yes, for sure.
So we have our schedules, we have our activities, and then meals fall in wherever they can. But it's a shift to making meals the most important. One meal a week, if nothing else. One meal a week. That is the most important, and the activities are planned around that.
Yeah. Instead of having, meals on the go towards practice or a recital. Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about what meals can be and what we learn and some spiritual benefits. I'd like to talk about that just for a few more moments before we close our conversation. And I really loved what you said about this. This is a spiritual time of sharing. And I think sharing is a spiritual practice that kids really need to learn. Just the art of, this is what I'm feeling, this is what's going on. I think it's healthy to learn and to have a space where we can do that.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's a huge part of faith, is learning to reflect inward and consider how God was working in my life and how maybe I was tempted today, and sharing that is a great thing. So is there any other spiritual benefits or maybe things we learn around a table?
Yeah. I mean, I think of all of the stories that Jesus told in the New Testament about banquets and feasts and going out and inviting people around the table to come and be a part of the feast. And to me, that means that we're all welcome. Everyone is valued. Everyone is important. Everyone is loved. And I think a spiritual lesson that we can teach our children by placing importance on mealtime and table time is, you are valued, you are loved, you are important, you are special, not just to me as your parent, but to God. And so being together and sharing things around the table and listening to each other is a way of communicating that. So I think that's huge.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think that was perfect. I thought about when you were talking, service, I think, is something that comes out a lot in our table time. We have to do all the work of making the meal, and then the cleanup afterwards. And I think getting our kids involved and getting everyone involved, there's not only a joy of working together, but I think it teaches us sacrifice, and serving one another is a really beautiful and important thing.
Yes.
And I think that's important. You help make the meal, and we help clean up, and that's a practice that Jesus definitely showed in his ministry and his life.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So Luana, I think our time is getting close to an end. I want to kind of leave you with kind of any open thoughts that you might have, and a final question so we've kind of talked about spiritual benefits, but do you have any other maybe practical, down-to-earth ways in which we can make meals happen and a priority?
Yeah, I do have some ideas, and I want to say there are so many resources out there too, and I think we're going to be sharing more of those for people to look up and check out on their own. But yeah, definitely. So I would say number one, shift your mindset as parents and start with that, and start viewing table time as in some of the ways that we've talked about. And I think that will be a huge thing right there. That alone will answer a lot of the questions of what and how and all that. So I would say that. Let's see, I do have some ideas here.
Yeah.
So start looking at table time missionally.
Okay.
So bigger picture. I think that for moms, especially because we, for the most part, are the ones that are nurturers. And so I think this will be a huge thing for moms to do.
Yeah.
And then I would say protect your table time. Be counter cultural. That's going to be so hard to do.
Yeah.
But, plan your meals around your activities, not the opposite. And then at your mealtime, table time, serve huge helpings of gratitude and blessings. So just whatever that looks like for your family, just make that a priority at your mealtime.
Yeah.
And then be creative. I mean, make it fun, and there are resources for that. One website that I really love is puttingfamilyfirst.org. So maybe you can check into that. Everybody can check into that and get some ideas there. But yeah, just make it fun. It doesn't have to be serious all the time.
That's right. Well, thank you so much, Luana, for joining us tonight. I hope that was really insightful to everyone. I know I learned a lot. I'm not a great cook. My wife, Natalie, would say that. But I get involved where I can. And I definitely eat the food. So, Luana, thank you so much. This has been great.
Yeah,
and again, like we mentioned, with each of these lessons and conversations, we're going to have a PDF on Highland's website that's going to give additional resources, website links, videos, scriptures and discussions, and then also a time of prayer at the end. So we thank you so much for joining us tonight. You'll have a good night.